Alright. I'd like to take a moment to explain my faith. I might make this a separate video if it takes a little while, because it might. I realize I didn't explain my faith when I was creating it. I just kind of threw together a whole bunch of stuff and said, and that's how it is. And, you know, that's great. So let me go over it one thing at a time and explain how I'm going to use this strategically. First, let's just start with the tenets. Anaconism. Anaconism is super overpowered. It allows you to destroy artifacts in order to obtain both money and piety. Normally, you can destroy artifacts in order to obtain money, but you don't gain piety. Reforging or repairing artifacts cost piety, but it doesn't cost that much. And you'll make much more piety from destroying artifacts, because you'll end up with lots of artifacts you can't use. You can only equip so many at a time. So ultimately, this is great. Plus, as an added benefit, you can destroy artifacts that would normally be too high quality for the game to allow you to destroy them, which grants you far more money and piety for destroying really, like, illustrious artifacts or masterworks that normally you're not allowed to destroy. Then there's the obvious additional benefit. Temple building construction time and cost are minus 33%, and the same with the holdings. This is really huge. I guess the idea behind this is, since graven images aren't allowed in temples, they don't decorate them with a lot of expensive materials, so it takes a lot less time and money to build them, and you can just have a lot of really high-functioning temples, which will be great because I might show off how you can make theocratic vassals later on, that will be their primary holdings, are temples. Monasticism. Monasticism allows you to ask your courtiers to take vows and become a monk or a nun if they're a female. It makes temperate a virtue, and temperate is a really great trait. So obviously, having that as a virtue, there's never a bad reason to be temperate. There's never a bad consequence for being temperate. But most importantly, if you ask your own children to become a monk or a nun, you would be excluding them from inheriting titles. And I'll explain why this synchronizes well with with female-dominated. Esotericism. It makes the wise man or woman trait virtuous. The entire line of the mystic traits are virtuous. The mystic trait, which I actually have, allows you to, I think it's called, hold a mystical communion. And when you do that, you earn 300 learning lifestyle points. But in addition, esotericism also makes it so you can gain this trait just by going on pilgrimages. Which means that even if you don't have this trait, there's a chance you could get it from going on a pilgrimage. And this will synchronize really well with a couple of different cultural traditions that give being a mystic additional advantages. So this is going to be a really good trait. I consider it even better than any other kind of tenet that gives you benefits from pilgrimages. I think it's better than armed pilgrimages. I think it's better than a lot of things. This is actually the most important tenet. Whereas anaconism and monasticism provide you with really great bonuses no one can argue with, this is a really good thing for a particular kind of strategy. To that end, I decided to make pilgrimages mandatory. By making pilgrimages mandatory, hopefully the amount of people who become mystics will be higher because they will have to go on a pilgrimage. They will be obliged to go on a pilgrimage, and hopefully they will pick up the mystic trait along the way, granting them all the additional advantages they will get if they are also a member of my culture in the future. I'll talk more about the traditions and what their benefits are once I create my culture. But for those who know, warrior priests and mendicant mystics are really good traditions that make being a mystic extra beneficial. I've decided to become theocratic with no head of faith. When you have theocracy, theocratic faith, all temple holdings need to be leased. They either need to be held by a theocratic vassal or they need to be leased to your realm priest, who might lease them to other people if they are over his domain limit, the amount of temples you have. But at the end of the day, it actually is really valuable because once you become landed, you have a domain limit, which is the number of holdings that you can hold efficiently. And as a feudal government, or really any playable government, you can only hold castle holdings effectively, meaning that you want to grant your city holdings and your temple holdings to other people or have them be leased. But really, you only want to have one castle holding per county, so that way your domain limit represents the number of counties that you hold and not just the number of holdings that you have. You don't want to have additional castles because then you would have to give them to a baron who would give you very little. The best kind of people to have these would be theocratic vassals or leasing them to the clergy, because they provide you the most taxes if you are a very pious person, if you have a high level of devotion. Ultimately, I decided to make I'll also show later on how you can create theocratic vassals, which pertains to another doctrine I chose. Now, let's move on to righteous. You can be righteous, you could be fundamentalist, or you can be pluralistic. If you're fundamentalist, you want to destroy all the heathens. If you're pluralistic, you're okay with other faiths, and righteous is in the middle, where you basically want to convert other people. You can fight against them. You can declare holy wars and take all of their land away, but you aren't quite as fundamentalist. You can't, the only thing is that the difference between righteous and fundamentalist is that fundamentalist can revoke titles from hostile vassals rather than just evil ones. So I could, for example, if I was fundamentalist, I could revoke them from other Christian faiths rather than just other faiths that are under different religions. The only problem with that is that even if you can legally revoke titles, you still they might resist, and you'll have to do a civil war. And the disadvantages of being a fundamentalist is that everybody hates you 100% more. The faith hostility is 100% worse. And at the end of the day, the ability to revoke landed titles legally doesn't matter, because you could just fabricate a claim on their title, on a single title from your vassal, try to revoke it, they'll say no, then they'll uprise against you, then you beat them in the civil war, and then you have a good reason to revoke the titles and imprison anyone who rose up in rebellion against you. Which means there's no reason for you to be fundamentalist at all. It gives you a legal precedent that you could easily obtain, and at the cost of everyone hating you 100% more. There's no real good reason for it at all. And pluralist wouldn't allow holy wars, so you wouldn't want that. Okay. Female dominated. The reason why I chose female dominated instead of, equality or something like that, which is pretty terrible. The normal disadvantage of equality is that you have lots and lots of heirs. You have twice as many heirs. You have men and women that can inherit. The reason you would normally do this would be you would have more heirs, and therefore more of your land would be divided to not your player heir. Now, because I took monasticism, I could actually turn anyone into a monk or a nun, which means that there would be no disadvantage to equality, right? Yeah, there really wouldn't be. I could have one player heir get everything by turning everyone else into a monk or a nun, which is easy enough to do even if they don't want me to do it. So why did I pick female dominated? It's because there are certain advantages that equality doesn't have based on my strategy here. When you pick female dominated, everybody who you convert to your faith, they are forced to change their succession laws. The problem with equality is that it allows for people to have either male preference equal or female preference succession. So I'm not concerned about myself when I make my faith female dominated. I'm not concerned about my succession law being equal or male preference. I'm concerned about my vassals. It's preferable for me to force all of my vassals to have female preference succession, because you want them to be the opposite sex of you, and in the long run I'll be able to get absolute crown authority and change my succession laws so that way I can appoint a male to be in charge, even under a female-dominated faith. If you ever wonder why it is that female rulers do so well in male-dominated faiths like Catholicism, it's because of the fact that they are the opposite sex of all of their vassals and everyone else. And that's because they have access to attraction opinion. Attraction opinion only applies to anyone who is sexually compatible with your character. They need to have a sexual orientation that would make them attracted to you. And 89% of characters that spawn into the game are heterosexual, and another 5% of them are bisexual, which means that the opposite sex has a 94% chance of being attracted to you, which means that they will be susceptible to attraction opinion. And if you go to a trait like a trait line such as the beauty trait line, the congenital beauty, that line gives you huge boosts to your attraction opinion, and that can allow you to be an absolute tyrant. Even if you're the opposite sex and they're attracted to you, you can basically do whatever you want. So for a long time, this is going to benefit me because all of the members of my faith will be women. And when I don't have lots of land, we're going to be up against the rest of the world, which is mostly male dominated. We're going to have an attraction advantage against the rest of the world while we are conquering all of them. And then, after we have conquered the rest of the world, I'm going to flip the script and make myself a man by executive fiat with my absolute crown authority. I'm going to appoint one of my sons to be the sole heir. And by the time that I conquer the entire world and convert them all to my faith, all of them will be women. So then I'll again have an attraction opinion benefit, while also benefiting from the other advantages of only female vassals, such as the fact that female vassals can only have children up to the age of 45. After that, their fertility runs out, and therefore appointing a woman over the age of 45 or getting her stuck into a marriage where she's not able to have, her own children of her own dynasty, that would allow you to basically make it so my dynasty controls everything. There's less children that a female ruler will have, and therefore they are also going to have their land break up less. Another benefit is that female rulers, they live longer. If they don't participate in combat, they're less likely to die. Normally, the people who are allowed to participate in combat are the only people who are allowed to be commanders, but rulers can always be commanders no matter what. So by having only female rulers, you'll have men serving as knights and women serving as commanders. And after the latest DLC, not the latest, but the Adventurer DLC, you can't be a knight and a commander at the same time, which means that I could focus on female commanders and male knights, and therefore I wouldn't have to choose between somebody being either a knight or a commander. It opens up my ability to have more commanders who are exempt from being knights. So that's all of the main doctrines done. I left the marriage doctrines alone because everything is pretty much what I would want it to be. Marriage type, monogamous. When you have monogamy, you can really predict exactly what it is that a ruler, what children they're gonna have. I could have had it be something else like polygamy or concubinage, but what are my sons going to be doing if they aren't going to be rulers? You know, one of the benefits, again, of female dominated is that I don't have to turn my sons into monks. They are going to be able to stay around in my court, and I'll have them at my disposal to become knights, but also to marry them off. And so when I go ahead and marry them off, I can marry my sons to my female vassals and force them to take a patrilineal marriage. That way, normally they wouldn't agree to this, but if I, for example, married them off to a woman and then landed her after the fact, a lowborn character is going to accept anything. They don't care whether the marriage is matrilineal or patrilineal. And let's say that it was a foreign noble, like a princess or something. Under their faith, they don't stand to inherit anything. So I could marry them to my son, make it a patrilineal marriage, so that way the children will be of my dynasty, and so that way that foreign princess will move to my court. Since it's a patrilineal marriage, they will move to wherever the man is staying, which would be my court. Then I could give her land, turn her into a vassal, and she's already trapped into a monogamous marriage. Even if my son were to die at some point, he would probably be much older by that point and not able to have any additional children. Because of this, I will have created a vassal who is going to ultimately produce cousins of my dynasty that will inherit everything. That's why monogamy is going to be very good for my strategy over anything else. If it was polygamy or concubinage, then at that point, once I gave her land, she would be able to just do whatever she wanted, take any additional husbands or concubines, and have a way of splitting up the land outside of my dynasty. That would be disastrous. Or it wouldn't be really advantageous, which is the same as a disaster as far as I'm concerned. Bastardry, legitimization, it's always nice to keep the option open of legitimizing, but I don't want to have it be default. That could be a problem. Avunculate marriage, you can marry your cousins, and that's it. You can't marry any other family members. That should discourage any of my other dynasty members from doing anything really stupid. There are plenty of other options. Divorce must be approved. Normally, what this would mean is that your head of faith needs to approve a divorce. But because I don't have any head of faith, I'm going to ultimately... that will be approved by me. I don't know where it says about my head of faith here, but I don't have a head of faith. Because of that, it must be approved by the house head, which should hopefully remain me. Same-sex relations, criminal, deviancy, criminal, male adultery, criminal, female adultery, criminal. It's always good to have the option to blackmail people with a strong hook if they do anything, and I don't want... that's my explanation for these two. For adultery, I really don't want there to be any adultery because I don't want people to be having any bastards I don't have control over. Kinslaying, accepted. The only reason I made this accepted was due to the fact that if you have it as anything else, it really doesn't give you any options to imprison somebody for slaying their own kin. It only allows you to imprison your own family members but kinslaying is already criminal to members of that dynasty. It's always criminal to them. This just concerns whether other members of your faith will have a negative opinion of you for slaying your own kin. It doesn't allow them to actually, like, imprison you, which means that this would just be a negative opinion penalty with all members of the faith with no advantage to be gained at all. And kinslaying is kind of buggy as well, in that if you have in which it's reversed, it's coded incorrectly. That's beyond the scope of my explanation of my faith, though. There isn't any reason to explain how it doesn't work properly. Witchcraft, virtuous. I am a witch. It's a free virtue. If I go and convert all of my family to witchcraft, I can make a witch coven. Being a witch is purely advantageous as long as your faith finds it virtuous. So, I made it virtuous. It's just a free virtue that all of my family will be able to get with all of the additional benefits of being a witch. Clerical function control. Plus 20% control growth from temples and the clergy. It's purely advantageous. There isn't any need for anything else. Clerical gender either. Now this is interesting because I could have made it women only. But I decided to make it either, mainly because I was a little bit concerned about how there might be bugs if I didn't make it either. I've heard from people in the past that it can be difficult to send men to a holy order if you make the clerical gender be just women or just men. They might be considered, holy order members, holy order knights might actually be considered to be members of the clergy for some reason as far as the game is concerned. So it could have bugged out my holy orders, but besides just that, there isn't any reason why I wouldn't want a male realm priest if he's got the highest learning. It's not like men are going to be rulers. They don't have a lot of other things to do, so having them be members of the clergy or knights or whatever else, as much things as possible is good. I think that it's a good idea. Clerical marriage allowed. Obviously, this won't actually allow monks to become married because monks and nuns can never get married. But this will allow for bishops. It doesn't allow holy order members or monks or nuns, but it does allow for bishops and priests to get married. Now, there are two reasons why I want clerical marriage. One is so that I can make my own family members into my realm priests without them divorcing anyone or without it not being allowed because they're already married. But also because there really isn't any disadvantage to allowing it. If you have a theocratic vassal and they are married, it doesn't mean that their children are going to inherit anything. Because theocracies always inherit based off of investiture. Another good member of the clergy will just take over. Another member of the faith who is a clergy member will just become the bishop of that theocracy as soon as they die. It has nothing to do with their family, so there's no reason to not allow bishops or priests to be married. It's purely beneficial. They're just going to be producing other potentially genetically superior members of the faith. There's no reason to disallow it. Clerical appointment, temporal revocable. This is an absolutely necessary thing for me. So this allows you to, as any ruler, you can appoint your own realm priests and you can fire them whenever you want. This is a necessary step in performing the exploit that allows you to create whatever kind of theocracy you want, and specifically to appoint any person you want to be the head of that theocracy. This is a huge benefit. Now, because I'm female dominated, I don't know if I'm going to be able to appoint men as bishops. I probably won't. Although, because of the aforementioned investiture, men are going to be able to inherit a bishopric if they are a member of the clergy. So there will be some male bishops, but for the most part, this should allow me to appoint any, due to a glitch, which I will demonstrate later on in my playthrough, you'll be able to appoint anybody who is your realm priest to become a theocratic vassal through an exploit where you appoint them as your realm priest, pause the game, fire them, and then grant them a title, which while the game is still paused, because until you unpause the game, their government type will still be theocratic. You can't give your realm priest titles, but if you fire them, then they are no longer your realm priest, allowing you to grant them a title and make them a theocratic government. I'll demonstrate this in real time and point it out when I do it. It's super overpowered because it allows you to create theocratic vassals and even appoint really young bishops or whoever you want to be a bishop. Funerary tradition, Stoic burial. I kind of usually ignore funerals, but Stoic burial is the best one, I guess. It's not too expensive and it allows you to just gain some extra piety from doing a funeral. The other one, there's some more fancier traditions that you could get, but really this doesn't matter to me. Under most circumstances, most people aren't going to be getting a funeral, or not like a special event funeral that would give me any benefit. And then because I'm a Christian faith, I get the teachings of Jesus. So this is actually purely disadvantageous to me because basically this means that anybody who has Christian syncretism, which is a tenet, will be considered hostile instead of evil, and I'll get plus 30 opinion with anyone who has that. Now, that sounds pretty okay, and that's fine with other non-Christian faiths with Christian syncretism. The problem is that because I am a new Christian faith, I do not have the special doctrine of ecumenism that all starting Christian faiths have. That means that I am not seen as a legitimate Christian faith. I wonder why, you know? My faith is totally it's the only legitimate Christian faith, obviously, but the other Christian faiths disagree. Because I don't have the ecumenism special doctrine, I'm not going to be considered legitimate, so they're all going to just ultimately despise me, even though usually Christian faiths are pretty chummy with each other. They aren't chummy with new Christian faiths. Catholicism and Orthodoxy and all of the other ones might like each other, but they don't like me. Later on, once I control all of the holy sites, which I should also explain, let me go ahead and go do that. Later on, once I control all of the holy sites, I'll be able to get ecumenism, and it will actually take it away from every other Christian faith, and all of the Christians should hopefully convert to my faith. But basically, for now, this is just going to mean that I'm going to be not seen as legitimate until I am able to take all of the Christian holy sites, mend the Great Schism, and establish myself as the one true Christian faith. In order to do that, I'm going to have to take all of them, and this is why I started as Orthodox instead of starting as Catholic or any other Christian faith. Because when you are Orthodox, you get these 5 Christian holy sites, and all of them have really, really good benefits, and they're all kind of close together, straddling the Mediterranean. Aside from the Vatican and Constantinople, which they're still on the Mediterranean, but they are obviously far away. And also, these are not going to be easy things for me to take, obviously. I'm thinking that I'll probably take Antioch first and move my way west before I piss off more than just Christians by taking Jerusalem and Alexandria. Maybe I can become somewhat friendly with the Muslims, because I'm certainly not going to be popular with my own religion. But all of these different holy sites that you inherit from your original faith, Orthodoxy, these are all the best holy sites in the game that any one faith can have. You get plus 20% monthly piety and county conversion speed from Jerusalem, plus 15% cultural fascination progress from Constantinople. Rome gives you plus 1 development growth, or plus 1 stewardship, plus 10% development growth. Alexandria gives you plus 1 learning per level of devotion, and I already have lots of learning and will have lots more. And then Antioch, which is one of the reasons I want to take it first, is plus 1 martial per level of devotion and plus 10% knight effectiveness. Both of these are benefits that will help me to quickly acquire all of the other holy sites, as well as anything else that I want. My martial is going to be outrageous. I should hopefully be able to gain massive amounts, and I can go into why I'm going to gain huge amounts of piety and my renown is going to skyrocket as well, but I should leave that for the explanation of my culture. This video has already gone on long enough. This is basically my explanatory idea of how it's all going to work, because I didn't explain it very well. I'm carrying steadily along, and I figure not everybody's going to want a really detailed explanation, but some people will. So that's it. Like and subscribe, and we will conquer the world next time.